Okay, I'm going to just add a little bit of a seasonality talk about the slide for seasonality. So we've got a slide for trend, and we've talked about that a little bit and what it might look like. Now there's seasonality, and I would talk about the two graphs. The first and most important graph to talk about is the one on the right, which is the average additive seasonal effects, basically all the years averaged out, and this is what we get. So in there you would talk about the highest peaks and lowest troughs. So it's quarterly data, so the highest peak in this particular data is in the fourth quarter at approximately 0.7 million liters of sales of wine above the trend line. So you've got to use units. You've got to make sure that if it's quarterly or monthly data, you talk about that. The lowest peak is in the first quarter, approximately 0.5 million liters below the trend line, or below the average, or below the expected average, whatever you want to say. So you've got to clearly state that. And then you've got to clearly give reasons for why you would expect that to happen. Now, we've talked about this. You don't need to do a lot of research to sort of figure out that wine sales might increase around October, December months, because we're heading into the holidays. People are off to their batches, school holidays and so on are coming around, and it's Christmas. Christmas is coming up. So people are going to stock up on wine. And it makes equally the amount of sense that January, March would be a drop in the sales, because again, that's the time when people are going to be starting back to work. They're over their holidays, so the time for celebrating and drinking of wine is sort of reduced at that point. And you can elaborate on those reasons if you wish. You can also talk about the fact that in quarter 2, April, June, again, there's been an increase in wine sales and another increase in July, September. If you could find reasons for maybe that, generally speaking, you could talk about that. But the main thing is to talk about the highest and the lowest points on that particular graph in units with reasons. And now the more difficult one is to go over to the left-hand side of the graph where you get the yearly data, and you basically say, is this showing a pattern? And most of the years are showing the lowest point to be in the first quarter, and the highest point, definitely the highest peak, to be in quarter 4. There's some mixing between quarters 2 and 3. It's not as consistent there as it is on the other ends of things, and you might want to mention that type of variability, where there's a number of years where quarter 2 might be higher than quarter 3, or there's no difference, or here is 2000, it looks like 2000, where quarter 2 is higher than quarter 3. So you can talk about those anomalies, those variabilities in that yearly pattern. You also want to talk about whether this is supporting the overall trend. And remember, the overall trend is increasing. So this is supporting that, because the orange lines, which are the later years, are the most past years, if you will. Those are on the bottom, and the blue are on the top, and that suggests that it's an increasing trend. And there's some gaps. It's not really tight, so there's considerable increase between the years, which this graph is showing, and so on. So you talk about that. Most of the years following the pattern, but there's some variability in quarters 2 and 3, and so you might elaborate on that. Remember, you only have 10 minutes, so you can't go into a huge amount of depth.